neuroscientist Dr. Nicolas Bazan is the very definition of a Renaissance man. With interest and expertise in a number of fields, he can metaphorically define his scientific research and technical findings in a way where his brilliance isn't lost in translation, but found in a manner deserving of an ovation.
Dr. Bazan, your obsession with the mind began before you were 9. You were 8 years old when your aunt had a grand mal seizure before you. In your fictional novel, Una Vida, that is based on your real life, your aunt's seizure is referenced this way. His aunt began to convulse violently. Her body flailed like a chicken whose neck had just been wrung. While this happened so many years ago, Dr. Bazan, can you still remember the details of that moment? And if so, please take us back to that moment, because it was that moment that really set the course for your career and for your life.
Yes. Well, that was really a special moment because I was very enthusiastic with piano, and I was going to this conservatory in northern Argentina, in a city called Salta, where we used to live at that time, and my aunt was also going to the conservatory to take lessons, piano lessons, was a younger sister of my mother. And when this event happened, my mother told me that her sister has a brain disease, epilepsy. And at that age, that stuck in my mind, brain disease. And I cannot tell how that connected with what happened to me thereafter, but there were 2 events. Number one, I didn't want to go anymore to the piano lessons. That was the end of me learning piano, and I regret immensely because I love music. I wish I continued to do that. And the second was something in my mind all along primary school, high school, all of that about the brain. And I believe that was an unconscious driver for me to go to medical school and to begin my research, even as a medical student, my interest about the brain. Yeah, I think that was a sort of an event that motivated me in a big way.
Well, that makes sense for sure. So speaking more about this novel of yours, in Una Vida, music plays such a large role, and you and I have talked about the correlation between music and the mind. I'd love for you to share now the effect that music has on the brain. And then after that, I'd love to just hear about how music can be such a beautiful metaphor to describe our minds and how they work.
Something that happens in Alzheimer's disease research during the last few decades is a realization that music awakens certain circuits in the brain of patients with Alzheimer's, even in advanced cases of Alzheimer's. And some, not all, will in a way reconnect in a temporary minor way with music. And these findings are very strongly supported by detailed research on the brain of these patients with imaging and this and that. But that several years ago gave rise to the idea that music therapy can help a patient with Alzheimer's disease. And this is the case. Many places in America and all over the world, assisted living facilities for people with dementia in different stages use music as a way to facilitate the connection, if one will say, because as the disease progresses, the connection of the mind of patients go far away. But some of them seem to be very receptive. So there's a big unknown there. Which circuits in the brain are those that are linked to the auditory system and to music? how much the music that the person have had earlier on in life influenced the process. All of those are questions that we don't understand very well. But the fact is that music therapy plays a role, and I use that in the novel as a way to somehow connect the issue of Alzheimer's disease music, the beauty of the city of New Orleans, and the jazz, because the character of the novel is a jazz musician, a fictional jazz musician that has Alzheimer's disease, and that was in a way a metaphor to try to convey, on one hand, the influence of music on the brain, and secondly, around the subject all along in the book and in the movie, my intention was to remove the stigma of Alzheimer's disease. You see, in our society, we have many stigmas linking conditions of our brain, diseases of our brain, Alzheimer's, epilepsy, addictions. Addictions are diseases, and people should not be stigmatized. And so I think my effort there, insofar as Alzheimer's disease as an example of a brain disease, was to remove the stigma of the disease and use New Orleans music and what I just told you about this important influence of music on the brain of patients with Alzheimer's disease.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hear you on the stigma side of things. There's far too many stigmas, and that are just, they're not helping anything
Yes.
or anyone. So to be done with those would be good.
Yes.
You know, so let's the fact of it is that many great books become great films, and this holds true with your novel Una Vida, that became the film of Mind and Music, written by you along with Richie Adams, who served as the film's director. The film stars Joaquim de Almeida, Ingenue Ellis, and Bill Cobbs. The cast did such an amazing job of embodying the characters that you created. So my question for you, in the number of conversations we've had, I've never asked you this. What was it like to see yourself portrayed as the character that you wrote, Dr. Alvaro Cruz, played by Joaquim? What was that like?
Well, that was an extraordinary experience, particularly because Joaquim de Almeida is such an extraordinary human being and great actor that until then, all the time he played the bad guy.
Yes.
Most movies that he did. And here he played this benevolent, understanding, concerned doctor that was trying to understand what happened to this jazz musician that has Alzheimer's disease. I think part was because he's a naturally good human being, and he knew that doing this, he was performing a character with a purpose that was going to have an impact. But the second reason is his mother had Alzheimer's disease. And so he was very, very motivated about the theme of the movie. But the axis was Alzheimer's disease, music. What can we portray here in this film that can be beneficial to the community? Mm-hmm. And it was rewarding, because one other factor in the making of the movie, because this was an independently made movie, was that time was of an essence. So they had to work from very early until very late, and that impressed me quite a bit, because the dedication that they all have, and that axis, mm-hmm. the disease, Alzheimer's, music, all the really intrinsic purpose of the fable of music and the mind, in which the book is based. I think that was something that drove inside each of them motivation and dedication.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it's very apparent, and the finished product, which is just, if there's anyone who has not seen the movie, they absolutely must. It's just incredible. As a neuroscientist, why is it important for you to use your knowledge of the mind outside of the lab?
Well, in a way, is to communicate, try to reach to the community and communicate with people, because I believe there is a void in the understanding, as we said at the beginning, of diseases of the brain and the significance, particularly when we age. So my writings, my novels, there are 2 published and others that I'm writing, have as an objective to try to somehow communicate that there are people in the labs like me and many others trying to really solve those issues that are so important to our community.
So we've talked about the artistic application of your knowledge with your book, your film. Now, let's focus on the scientific work that you've done and that you continue to do with so many successes over the years. I would love to hear your personal top 3 achievements in your lab.
Well, the very first one is I've been lucky to be surrounded all my life in all the different laboratories. I began a lab first, a second, this is the 3rd one now that I have for several decades now, to be surrounded by highly motivated, highly talented people. And I have a style of mentoring and guiding, which is very open, and I like really to make an effort and listen to everybody, because everybody contributes all the time. So the first, if you will call it achievement, is that I have been lucky to be surrounded always by great people. And the second one, scientifically, my experiments and the ideas that we test are based on one very straightforward principle. We are trying to decipher if there is a molecular logic in our brains to be able to survive, and in some cases to have 9 decades of healthy cognition and vision, and in others that fails. But the driver for that had been always the following. Ali, think about, for example, familial forms of Alzheimer's disease. Those are people that are born with a mutation in certain genes. We know now 5 of them, that those that are born with the mutations in those genes, they will develop inevitably Alzheimer's disease. Now, the development of the disease typically begins at age 35 or 40. Some a little earlier, but in general 35 or 40. So my question had been, and continues to be, what happened in the brain during those 30 or 40 years? The mutation is there that causes Alzheimer's, yet clinically, the loss of cognition, the loss of memory, take 3-4 decades to pop out. So the question that came to my mind was, is the brain making something inside that counteract the expression of the mutation? That's why clinically there is no symptoms of disease. In our experiment, we call it, we are fishing for molecular guardians of our brain. And we published the discovery of molecular guardians, most recently in 2017, specific chemicals that the brain makes. Normally, in the cells of our brain, there are building blocks of those guardians, and they are alert and ready to be made when needed. Stroke, traumatic brain injury, the onset of Alzheimer's, and I'll be talking about that in a national, well, an international meeting 10 days from now that will be held here in New Orleans. So the onset of Alzheimer's, or onset of Parkinson's, triggers the making of those guardians, and those guardians are made in our brain in very, very little quantities, yet they are very powerful because they are neuroprotective, and they try to restore the function of the brain. And so, it's difficult to respond which are achievements, but globally, that is one that we have actually hypothesized and tested and discovered that is the case. So when we found that, then we collaborated with the chemist to make what we found, and then that molecular guardian, we put it back in the brain, or we put it back in brain cells in a petri dish, and we demonstrated that effectively they are neuroprotective molecules, and so that will be one achievement of our laboratory. So the concept of the idea of molecular guardian and the discovery of the molecular guardians of these specific molecules, they create in a way resiliency in our brain, but they are not the only ones. I believe there are complementary mechanisms. I think in order to have all the extraordinary properties of our brain, we need a complementary kind of mechanisms. We call them redundancy. For sure there is redundancy. For sure our molecular guardians are working alongside other similar mechanisms, and all together are the ones that protect, imagine, our memory, all the wonderful things that our brain does.
Well, that's so interesting, and it actually just makes me, previous conversations that you and I have had about music and about the different instruments, all combining, working together to create, this full sound. And if they're fragmented, it's a very different expression. So just like you're saying, to have these, different parts and pieces that are all sort of working together collaboratively.
Well, I think a symphonic orchestra, in a way, is a good analogy of how the brain works, because in the brain, in our brains, we have a multitude of mechanisms. We have trillions of connections between neurons, which are called synapses, and there are circuits there that we don't understand quite well, that allow us to make decisions, allow us to have emotions, and to do things that artificial intelligence and machine learning and computers will never do.
It's so fascinating. So at this moment, you have a number of scientific breakthroughs that you've discovered. I would love for you to share what findings specifically you've made recently pertaining to, it's so fascinating to me, both degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and acute events like strokes. What is one particular finding most recently that speaks to those?
What we have tried is and we are slowly succeeding, is trying to demonstrate the molecular mechanism of action of these guardians. How do they work? What do they do? And teasing apart brain cells, we began finding that the DNA in those brain cells gets methyl groups, is methylated, and so a very straightforward set of experiments that we have done are adding to human brain cells in a petri dish oligomeric A-beta peptide. A-beta peptide is a protein. Is a protein that is formed and accumulate in abnormal amounts in Alzheimer's disease, and that will make the senile plaques. And so, but when the senile plaques form in our brain, it's too late, okay? Because then there are a lot of consequences of pathology. We are interested about the causes. What is the very beginning? So we use the little oligomers, which are pieces of those, and add to the cells. And so we were able to identify their mechanisms at the level of the DNA and the level of the chromosomes of the cells that are driving aging in a wrong way. And when I say driving aging in a wrong way, is that those cells will really start misfunctioning and will die. And we can measure the death of neurons in a petri dish. And with our molecular guardian, the most recent one that we discovered, that we call elovanoids, they are able in very low amount to block that process. So in parallel, we have a mouse that has a mutation of that particular form of toxic molecules of Alzheimer's. So we are testing there the same mechanisms. The third way that we are doing, as you know, I have a very active interaction in the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. I'm appointed professor there, and we have published 3 papers very recently together, where we have discovered in the cerebrospinal fluid of patients with Alzheimer's disease changes that give us hints about what we are seeing in a petri dish. So we are trying to combine what happened with brain cells in a petri dish with animal models and with patients with Alzheimer's. In a nutshell, some of those guardians are anti-inflammatory to our brain, and other guardians are pro-inflammatory. The pro-inflammatory are bad guardians because they will produce damage. The anti-inflammatory are our good guys that contain the damage. And so we were able, by first time, to put this in perspective. You know, Ali, this is like using different models, different approaches, bring us like in a puzzle. You know, these are pieces of a puzzle, and bring us to understand almost, and we aim to understand the totality of that.
Wow, well, it's so fascinating. So beyond life in the lab, life in your office, on set, on stage at times, you have a life at home. Again, let's go back to your achievements. Among all your achievements, I know your family is at the top of that list. You and your wife, Dr. Allié Bazan, you've raised 5 accomplished children and are blessed with 14 grandchildren. You've been so incredibly successful, both at work and at home. How? What is the secret to that level of success in life?
Well, there's no secret. I mean, you know, Heidi she's a PhD scientist, the faculty here at LSU does outstanding science on the eye, actually in the cornea of the eye, and part of the roots that we have are an event that happened in our lives 40 years ago. At that time, I was the head of a research institute that I began in Argentina, but we have a military dictatorship there, and I had to leave the country from one day to the other. And literally, the ambassador of the United States sent us to a plane, Heidi, my wife, and 5 children, and we have actually 4 suitcases and 2 boxes with some papers that I was able to put together of the work that I was doing. We really escaped. We arrived to Miami without visas, and the State Department was so extraordinarily open. They were waiting for us in Miami without visas, and we arrived to this country. And perhaps that event marked our children somehow. Our older daughter at that time was 14 years old. We have 14, 12, 10, 7, and 2 years old. And they did not speak the language. They did not understood the culture of America. We are right here in July. In August, they went to school. And it was quite also I had to begin my life as a scientist here. Heidi stayed at home organizing things for a few months, and then she also came to work at the university. But perhaps that event somehow gave our children some perspective. But Ali, they all went through life now 40 years here, 4 decades, and they went through up and downs in life, and as any human being, they have up and downs, but fortunately, all of them have work ethics, have values. Are all of them in different manners. They are dedicated to the community, and they are doing great things. They survive their own experiences and their own challenges successfully. I don't know what what we did. I mean, we just tried to. Heidi and I tried to, in a silent way, perhaps to show that values and a life of principles and purpose around the family is important. Perhaps it's difficult to say. Well, this is the reason.
Right. There was a few different things here, but certainly with principles and purpose, how can you go wrong, I suppose? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. So I would love to end this. Well, I wouldn't like to end this conversation. I'd like to just keep talking all night long. But let's end this conversation with an operatic metaphor. As a patron of the arts and supporter of the New Orleans Opera, this seems befitting. So, for those who feel their life has consisted of nothing but a straight tone, how do they find their vibrato? How do they find that vibrato in their own life?
It's a very interesting question, and for various reasons. I mean, I've been a member of the board of the opera for a few decades actually, and Heidi and I chair the Maestro Circle of our opera. The Opera New Orleans is very special because it was the very first opera in the Americas, before than Washington, Chicago, and opera itself. The music is very, very important in a way because, as you know, not only you have the singing and the music, but the acting all together. So it has a special power. And something that I like to share with you is the fourth theme that will be portrayed in New Orleans, which will be at the end of January, is actually Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker is a very special connection to me, for me, even before coming to the United States, because I read about him many years ago. He created a different form of jazz and was a very special, talented musician. But he wanted at one point or another to connect jazz with other forms of music. I mean, there is evidence that perhaps he even wanted to connect it with classical music. I don't think he ever did, but he has a very tragic life. I think he had 4 or 5 wives, but when he was a teenager, this impacted me many years ago, and he is from the beginning to the end in my novel Una Vida, Charlie Parker. When he was a teenager, had some sort of a condition and was put on painkillers, and he became an addict. And not only painkillers, but alcohol, drugs, and he died when he was 33, 34 years of age. But what he did in that period of time was really extraordinary, and the Philadelphia Opera Philharmonic decided to do an opera for him, which is Charlie Parker, and that will be portrayed here at the end of January. In fact, Heidi and I are the sponsors of that, but this will be an opera without the symphony. It will be an opera with only a small group of musicians, I don't know if you are aware, but one form of opera that began 500 years ago is the chamber opera, where you only have 4 musicians, and so Charlie Parker, and also the conductor of the opera is a professor from Juilliard, who was born in Argentina.
Wow.
And this is a more broad, general answer around your question, which is a good one.
Yes, it's all about just finding the inner vibrato, and which
Absolutely.
well, I can't thank you enough for your time, for your work, for all that you've done for so many throughout the course of your career and your life, and just for helping all of us become a bit more aware now. Thank you so much.
No, I want to thank you, because what you do is very, very important in many facets. I mean, what you and Jack have done in your publication, I believe, has a tremendous impact on society, because you deal with issues that are so important, so critical, and many other media deal with more superficial aspects of issues. I think what you have tried to do, unlike other media, is to go a little bit more in depth about these issues that are so important. So thank you for doing what you and Jack are doing, and congratulations because I believe you have a high impact on society with what you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Honored to have you on this journey with us.
This is one of the
Hi.
She is doing an honor thesis with me, and is a medical student that we graduate in 1 year.
Yes,
No, she's doing an interview for something, so I'm going to the lab. Walking to the lab, I hope this will not disconnect. Okay, what's going on here? Oh my God, look at this.
Hi, everyone.
Actually, I came to check what are you all doing. I've been lucky, and I mean it. I hope all of you are included, because I have always been surrounded by people that are interested on what they do. They have talent, they have dedication, and this is you all. Are you taping, Ali?
Yep, it's recording.
Recording, okay. People, very nice, but they must go to work, all of them now. Bola, come over. This is actually a cardiologist, okay? He came from Egypt and had been in the lab already for 1 year and a half, and now we're working on the stroke project. Madigan, come over. This is one of the talented persons. She's a PhD candidate, but in the middle of being a PhD, she decided most recently, because at the beginning you never told me that, most recently that she wants to go to medical school. So she will finish hopefully soon. I'm trying to get her out of here soon and go to medical school hopefully soon.
Wonderful.
This is Dr. Calandria. Jorgelina is one of the success stories of our laboratory. In a way, she's in a clear path of full independence. She has developed new ideas of her own on Parkinson's disease, and she's committed to develop them, and is doing super science. And let's see, this nice lady here, Mary Audrey, why don't you say a few things about you, where you came from?
Yeah. I'm originally from Martinique, a French island in the Caribbean. I did my PhD in France, Strasbourg, and I did a postdoc in UC Davis, and this is my second postdoc with Dr. Bazan. It's a pleasure to work with him. He's very talented, a lot of good ideas, and we have our hands on very nice equipment, so we are very pleased with that.
The one hidden here, why don't you take your mask? Because, yeah, actually, Vivo is a problem that I have in some ways.
because he takes away. He was in India, came back, and tell in a few words. You know, Ali, we will be talking about successful aging shortly, and we are very much interested about things that happen in the chromosomes when methyl groups get in there. It's called DNA methylation. And with Vivo, actually, thanks to his efforts, we identify mechanisms at the level of the DNA and the chromosomes, because our chromosomes, if they get shorter, you know, that is a failure of aging. We have to try to keep our chromosomes longer, and there are mechanisms to keep them there. And we found ways to do that with human cells. And do you want to add something? Said a few things, Vivo.
Hi, Ali. So, like as Dr. Bazan mentioned, like right now we are looking at epigenetic regulation of chromosomes, like with telomerase and histone methylation, DNA methylation. And one of Dr. Bazan's lipid mediators that he identified and discovered in the lab, we are seeing that we can alter implications that are being affected through multiple diseases. So that's like a great area that we are working and trying to understand and uncover more things.
The other one that I wanted just briefly to mention is Jeff G. He's a MD, PhD candidate. Okay, Alice that you met earlier is an MD doing an honor thesis, but he's doing the full MD and the full PhD. He came from Canada. Do you want to say a few words,
Yeah,
Jeff?
sure. I did my undergraduate and master's at McGill in Montreal, and I met Dr. Bazan during my master's when he gave a wonderful lecture. So I was really motivated to work in his lab, and that was a big reason I applied to LSU for the MD PhD program. I work in the realm of stroke, interested in lipidomics and eventually transcriptomics.
So so this is Rasangi. We just show up. You see, she's a chemist that came from LSU to work in the lab, and Dr. Gordon is there. I mean, Bill and I have been working together for 3 decades. 3 decades?
Wow.
More than 3 decades. He's very talented cell biologist, physiologist. Even he begins now to speak a little bit of molecular biology sometimes also. Do you want to say the word, Bill?
No. But what I'm interested in is the retina. I look at mostly human donor retinas, older retinas that are normal or have AMD. And I do sections on those retinas. We isolate areas of those retinas for mass spectrometry. And we're trying to find out what the differences are between AMD and the normal ones in the macula and in the periphery. And we find that there are major differences, gender differences, and probably it looks like the female retina is much more susceptible to AMD than the male. And that's what I'm doing.
Okay, here is, thank you, Bill. Here is another graduate student doing a PhD. She came from Tennessee, and here in LSU we are not very happy with Tennessee, but that's another story.
Very recently not happy.
Yeah, really was like, what was it like?
It was close.
It was bad. Okay, we are talking about football now, okay?
Yes.
You cannot mess with LSU or the Saints. Okay? Although the Saints, we might be calling them soon the Aints, as we used to. Anyhow, go ahead, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I have a bachelor's and a master's, again from Tennessee, as Dr. Bazan said. I'm very lucky that he accepted me into his lab. I'm mostly interested in epigenetics behind neurodegeneration and degenerative diseases. So he welcomed me with open arms, and I'm now with him and Dr. Calandria and Vivo working on the genetics projects.
Good. So we are going to go back to my office now, and thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Okay, let's see if his knee will start working. Thank you.
Oh, that was lovely to see them.
Well, yeah, so these are special people.
It's all about the people that we work with.
Absolutely. Oh, walking in the hallway here is the assistant business manager. You see?
Hi.
Hello.
This is Kathy. And hidden desk is Zebi.
Zebi, hello.
Zebi literally has been 35 years?
Yeah, more.
More than 35 years, my assistant.
Oh, so amazing to meet you.
Yeah, these are all amazing people.